I'd like to introduce our today's session chair, Professor Desai. Professor Venkapaya Desai is a professor at Civil Engineering Department of the Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur, and he is currently the Dean of the Faculties of Engineering and Architecture. He did his PhD from Clemson University, USA, and after that he has been working in academics in different institutes, and he has an experience of over 26 years in academics. He joined the IIT Kharagpur in 1995 as an assistant professor. He has undertaken his research area is integrated water resources management and sustainable development. He has undertaken several consultancy and research and development projects by the Government of India as well as private sector, and has published in several reputed journals in the field of integrated water management system. To his credit, he has a book, Environmental Hydrology and Hydraulics, in the year 2006. He is in the board member of several IITs, academic institutions like IITs and NITs. I would like to first of all thank Professor Desai because he has been a guiding force behind this event. And wherever we needed any support for conducting this event, he was always available. And we are just students who are in the campus since last few years, but he has been a guiding light for promotion of Sanskrit in IIT Kharagpur since he has joined the institute. And currently, he is also the West Midnapur Jilla Adhyaksh of Sanskrit Bharati. And in that capacity, also Professor Desai would be chairing this session.
Dhanyavad Kuldeep ji. So अद्य मम सौभाग्य अस्ति अहं डॉक्टर जयराम महादेवन महाभागस्य परिचयं करोमि. So in English, so Dr. Jairam Mahadevan, a researcher in Yoga Shastra, holds a PhD in Sanskrit from the University of Madras, which was awarded to him in 2010 with a gold medal and first rank. Prior to that, he also had undergraduate and postgraduate degree from there. So he underwent traditional Gurukula education in Vedas and Shastras during 1998 and 2005. So in Veda Vijnana Gurukulam in Bengaluru under Pracharya Kotemane Ramakrishna Bhatt. He served the research department of Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram for 10 years. His work is in the field of textual aspects of yoga involving editing, translating and disseminating inputs from traditional Sanskrit literature on yoga. Thus far, he has published 14 books and 12 peer-reviewed journal articles on yoga and Sanskrit literature. He is also involved in developing immersive learning methods of yoga texts. Yogasya Bhasha, a 4-part self-learning material on Sanskrit and yoga. Yoga Vaisharadi, a searchable web repository on classical texts of yoga, are a few of his noteworthy contributions in the recent times. His workshops on Tantra Yukti, ancient Indian thesis, text construction methodology are well received in the academic circles related to Sanskrit and Indology. His love also lies in composing Sanskrit poetry on contemporary themes. So with this brief introduction of Dr. Jairam Mahadevan-ji, so I do not want to be in between you and Dr. Jairam. So I request Dr. Jairam to deliver his talk today. Okay, over to Dr. Jairam.
Thank you very much, Desai Mahodaya. सर्वेषां नमस्कारः। आरम्भे एकं मङ्गलश्लोकम् उक्त्वा आरम्भं करोमि। योगेन चित्तस्य पदेन वाचां मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपाकरोत्तं प्रवरं मुनीनां पतञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिरानतोऽस्मि। आबाहुपुरुषाकारं शङ्खचक्रासिधारिणं सहस्रशिरसं श्वेतं प्रणमामि पतञ्जलिं। श्रीमते अनन्ताय नागराजाय नमो नमः। श्रीगुरुभ्यो नमः। संस्कृतोत्सवः। अस्य वर्षस्य संस्कृतोत्सवे संस्कृतं योगः इत्यस्मिन् विषये विचारविनिमयार्थं माम् आहूतवद्भ्यः IIT खरगपुर संस्थायाः प्रमुखेभ्यः मम वन्दनानि। अनुराधा भगिनी विशिष्य आमन्त्रितवती। तस्याः कृते देसाई महोदयः आरम्भे परिचयं कारितवान्। सः अस्याः सभायाः अध्यक्षः अपि अस्ति। तस्मै वन्दनानि निवेदयामि। उपस्थितेभ्यः सर्वेभ्यः अपि श्रोतृभ्यः मित्रवरेभ्यः मम वन्दनानि आदौ संस्कृतभाषया विनिवेद्य अग्रे आङ्ग्लभाषया अनुवर्तयामि। Because this is Samskrita Utsava, so at least a few sentences in the beginning. This is how my guru used to do, Professor Ramachandra Bhatt. So at least a few sentences in Samskrita in the beginning, whichever platform it is, and then commencing or getting into the topic. So I will right away share my screen. Hope it is visible. Samskrita and Yoga, significance and desideratum. So we know that Yoga is a multi-dimensional discipline, because in any typical Yoga certificate course or degree, whoever has undergone that, it is a popular thing these days. So that there are sciences in it: anatomy, physiology, papers on anatomy, physiology, psychology, all these, biomechanics, all these are there. Sciences are involved in the study of yoga. And of course, traditional Samskrita disciplines are also involved in this. Ayurveda, Sankhya Darshana, Yoga Darshana, all this is involved in this. And furthermore, it is not theoretical, one has to practice. Physical activity is also involved. It is not mere armchair activity. Physical activity is also involved. So in this way, we see that yoga has many dimensions, of which the central dimension or the core knowledge of yoga comes from the traditional Samskrita disciplines, based on which science is now exploring, understanding the wonders and glory of the yogic practices. So thus we see that there is a central role for Samskrita in yoga darshan or yoga practice, theory, yoga philosophy. Now, so this is one aspect, and we see in yoga literature itself that study of shastras which are in Samskrita is part of yoga practice itself. So Samskrita adhyayana or shastra adhyayana is part of yoga practice itself. Yoga is not merely limited to asana, pranayama, etc. That is also very important. But when we see the shastras themselves, that study of the shastra is a part of yoga practice. How? We see that there is an interesting verse in Vyasa Bhashya for Yoga Sutra 1.28, where we see Tajjapas Tadartha Bhavanam. To that sutra, Vyasa gives a shloka. Vyasa quotes a shloka. I think this is from Vishnu Purana. He says, Swadhyayat Yoga Masita. Yogat Swadhyaya Mamanet. Swadhyaya Yoga Sanyuktya Paramatma Prakashate. Swadhyaya and Yoga should go together. So, by Swadhyaya is Pranavadi Mantra Japaha Moksha Shastra Adhyayanam Va. So, what is Swadhyaya? Swadhyaya is the recitation or the japa of mantras like Pranava. And Moksha Shastra Adhyayanam, the study of Shastras which lead to Moksha. This is Swadhyaya. And Swadhyaya and Swadhyayat Yoga Masita. One should practice yoga with Swadhyaya. So, by study, by Swadhyaya, practice becomes transformative. It is not mere mechanical. We understand the mechanics behind it. And then when we practice, then the practice becomes transformative. And then the reverse is also important. Yogat Swadhyaya Mamanet. As we practice, our insights into the learning, study, Shastra Adhyayana becomes deeper. So the newer and practice reveals newer insights. So in this way, Swadhyaya, the study of Shastra, which are predominantly in Sanskrita, especially Moksha Shastra, Yoga, Yoga Shastra, Yoga Darshana. So that and Yoga should go together. Swadhyaya Yoga Sanyuktya, when both these are beautifully blended together. Not mere Yoga, not mere Swadhyaya. Na Shastra Pathamatrena Yoga Siddhihi Prajayate. Mere study of the Shastras cannot be counted as or will not lead to Yoga Siddhi, success in yoga, or mere practice alone will not lead to the desired goal of yoga. So Swadhyaya Yoga Sanyuktya. Both these should come together beautifully. They should be blended beautifully. Paramatma Prakashate. Only then the Paramatman or the pure consciousness is revealed. So we see from this verse of Vyasa that it is not merely that Samskrita has means Yoga Shastra has Samskrita literature. That's why we have to look into the details of it. But study of Shastra itself is part and parcel of the transformative journey in the path of yoga. So that is the idea, the philosophical mooring of the study of Shastra, which we have to look into before getting into the topic. Now, we come to the normal question, that is, what is there in Samskrita related to yoga? The what of it. We will come to the why of it in much more detail later. Now, let's just see what are all the literature, what are all the texts. When we say Swadhyaya and yoga should go together, what is there in yoga, Yoga Shastra, to do Swadhyaya upon? Actually, that is a vast topic. The Yoga Shastra, the yoga literature in Samskrita is quite vast. So, there is a Nyaya there is a maxim in Samskrita, Sthali Pulaka Nyaya, which is called in English as a case study or sample study. So, I'll just quote or kind of introduce one section of Samskrita literature available in for or connected to Yoga Shastra. Then you can understand how vast the Samskrita resources on yoga exist. So I'll just focus only on one section of Samskrita literature available on Yoga Shastra, that is the Yoga Sutra commentary literature. Everyone knows that the foundational text for yoga is Yoga Sutras. Even in the beginning, I uttered an invocation on Sage Patanjali. Sage Patanjali, he wrote the Yoga Sutras. Scholars are of various opinion about the period of Sage Patanjali, which ranges from 2nd century BCE to 3rd or 4th century CE. So in that period, he wrote the Yoga Sutras, and on that Yoga Sutra, there is a unbroken continuity of Samskrita commentary literature. We can see that itself indicates how vast the Samskrita sources are there for yoga. So almost contemporary to Patanjali, we see a commentary by ascribed to sage Vyasa. Again, who this Vyasa is another question for another lecture. So Vyasa's commentary is there almost contemporary to Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, which is considered as primary commentary. On this Vyasa's commentary, all these texts which I am mentioning are in Sanskrita. On this Vyasa's commentary to Yoga Sutra, we have a series of sub-commentaries. The 9th or 10th century Tattva Vaisharadi by Vachaspati Mishra. On that Tattva Vaisharadi, there is Patanjala Rahasya. Again on Tattva Vaisharadi, we have a commentary by Balarama Udasina. Then going back to the Tika on Vyasa's commentary, there is a Vivarana commentary to Vyasa's commentary. Then there is a sub-commentary called Vartika by Vijnana Bhikshu in the 15th century. Then in around 20th century, again there is a sub-commentary to Vyasa's commentary on Yoga Sutra called as Bhaswati by Hariharananda Aranya. So one commentary and its sub-commentaries, that itself is a one great set, beginning from 3rd century to 20th century. The richness of literature on Yoga Sutra themselves, and it doesn't end here. The commentary literature on Yoga Sutra continues. We see independent commentaries, means all these commentaries that we saw are connected to Vyasa's commentary, Vyasa's sub-commentary. So Vyasa's commentary and Vyasa's sub-commentaries, these are. There are independent commentaries directly written on Patanjali Yoga Sutra. For example, in the 10th century, Rajamartanda by Bhojadeva. Then in 16th century, Maniprabha by Ramanandayati. 16th, 17th century, Pradipika by Bhavaganesha or Pradipa by Bhavaganesha. And then Narayana Tirtha wrote 2 commentaries on Yoga Sutra, Yoga Siddhanta Chandrika and Sutrartha Bodhini. Nagoji Bhatta, the famed grammarian who is also known as Nagesha Bhatta, he wrote again 2 commentaries, Brihadvritti and Laghuvritti on Yoga Sutras. And then Yoga Sudhakara by the great yogin Sadashiva Brahmendra. And then Yoga Siddhanta Chandrika of Anantadeva Pandita, Yoga Pradipika by Baladeva Mishra, Kirana Krishna Vallabhacharya, Vaidika Vritti by Swami Hari Prasada, and the list goes on. At least 28 such commentary entries are there in the Encyclopedia of Indian Philosophy, which shows, as I said, that one text, Yoga Sutra, and at least 28 commentaries are there, ranging from the 3rd century CE till 20th century. And Krishnamacharya also wrote a commentary, great yoga practitioner who was the teacher of Pattabi Joyce, B.K. Iyengar and such gurus. He also wrote a commentary called Yogavalli in the 20th century. So the literature on just one yoga text itself is vast. Then you can imagine, so this is Thali Pulaka Nyaya. So then you can imagine how much of wealth of knowledge is available. I don't say that yoga jnana, the knowledge of yoga, is there only in Samskrita. In Tamil also there is a great Siddha yoga tradition, but we are in the context of celebrating the Samskritotsava, so I should highlight the vastness of literature in yoga about Samskrita. And I have just mentioned, as I said, one text. So if we can consider as this as the tip of the iceberg, there is an entire iceberg beneath it, where there is Vedeshu Yoga Asti. So there are Samhita, Brahmana, Aranyaka portion, and my survey for a particular research paper indicated at least 104 references from Rigveda Samhita connected to yoga related meditative practices. I presented a paper on it some couple of years in 2019. So in just one Samhita literature, so you can think of, there are so many Samhita, Aranyaka, Brahmana, Upanishad texts. And then when we come to the Itihasas, Ramayana and Mahabharata, Ramayana is of 24,000 verses and Mahabharata is 100,000 verses, and there also we find lot of yoga. Bhagavad Gita, which itself is a great yoga text, Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, all those yogas are present in that Mahabharata. And then Purana, the Ashtadasha Mahapuranas contain lot of yogic. Every Mahapurana contains references on Ashtanga Yoga, and we find at least close to 5 lakh verses, 500,000 verses in Puranas. Such a vast literature. There also invariably every Mahapurana has references to Ashtanga Yoga. And then in Agamas, Shaiva Vaishnava Shakta Agama, which is also called as Tantra, that literature is also quite vast. There also we find yoga, yogic references. These Samskrita texts also contain yogic knowledge. And then the entire Hatha Sampradaya is there, Hatha Yoga is there, which begins from around 9th and 10th century until 20th century. Various texts, they begin, so written by so many great yogis like Matsyendranatha and so many others, Gorakshanatha and others. Great tradition is there. Swatma Rama and Goraksha, all others have written. So that is another vast literature. And then there is a blend of yoga and Vedanta that also created, the hybrid of yoga and Vedanta created again a mass of literature, especially the Yoga Upanishads. At least 20 Upanishads are there, which are edited and published by Adayar Theosophical Society. And then this Yoga Vasishtha of about 30,000 and odd verses. It is also a beautiful blend of yoga and Vedanta. And of course, the Jaina Bauddha Darshana, they also contain yogic wisdom. So in this way, we see what to do Swadhyaya in yoga. So this much of literature is available. Samskrita literature is available in yoga to be studied. So we have seen the what of it. So of course, there is a lot of Samskrita Jnana to be unraveled, discovered, studied, and to be practiced with related. So the knowledge system of yoga is very much connected, very much established in the Samskrita language literary tradition. Now, let it be so. Let's translate it and then read it. Why Samskrita? The why of it needs to be addressed. Or we can just get the knowledge just looking at the essence of the text. Why should we get into the subject, or why should we get into the language as such? The deeper, why should we descend into the deeper aspects of language, the Samskrita Bhasha, to gain more insights? If we don't, there will be problems. If we do, there are advantages. I'll just highlight a few examples to show the why of Samskrita for yoga. Let's first take up a couple of problems. Fancifulness. So direct, kind of without consulting the Samskrita sources or looking deeper into the commentary literature of Samskrita, if one attempts to get along with the yoga literature, one ends up with fanciful interpretations. No, it is not me who is saying this. George Feuerstein, he says in his work, the Yoga Sutra of Patanjali, published in 1989, he says all kinds of, just on one particular sutra, he says this. I've just taken that as an example. All kinds of fanciful explanations have been proposed for this aphorism. This is what he says. So, without deeper understanding of Samskrita texts, if we look into the commentary literature or the sutras as such, then there is a possibility that we end up imagining various meanings which may not essentially exist or may not essentially be intended by Patanjali himself. So, especially I would like to, this sutra 2.47 is directly on the asana aspect of it. I'm not going to speak about the philosophy of yoga, etc. Asana is the direct practiced limb, means directly. When yoga is normally these days synonymous with asana, so this particular sutra that Feuerstein speaks about is about asana itself. Patanjali himself gives a technique of practice of asana, a couple of techniques. Prayatna Shaithilya Ananta Samapattibhyam. Sutra 2.47 of Yoga Sutra is Prayatna Shaithilya Ananta Samapattibhyam. Tatra sthira sukham asanam is 2.46. Prayatna shaithilya ananta samapatibhyam is 2.47. Tato dvandva anabhigataha is 2.48. So sthira sukham asanam, most of you might know, comfortable and steadiness is what is what characterizes asana. And then how to attain that sthira sukham? By prayatna shaithilya and by ananta samapatti, sthira sukham is attained. By sthira sukham, what is achieved? Dvandva anabhighataha, not being afflicted by the pair of opposites like sukha, dukkha, ushna, shita, labha, hani, all those pair of opposites afflicted by the pair of opposites, that will not be there. So this is the set of sutras on asana. And we are focused on just one technique about which Feuerstein mentions about the fanciful interpretations emerging. Prayatna shaithilya, two simple Sanskrita words. So by prayatna shaithilya, asana becomes sthira and sukha, firm and comfortable. What is prayatna shaithilya? The simple word meaning is prayatna is effort, shaithilya is slackening. So by prayatna shaithilya, by slackening the effort, asana becomes sthira and sukha. That is the technique that Patanjali says. Now there will be, when we just look at the text, there will be a lot of confusion. How can we achieve something steady and comfortable by slackening the effort? Should we not spruce up? Should we not tighten? Should we not be more intense? So what is the understanding? If we superficially look at this, then fancifulness, simplistic interpretations, all those things come up. I'm just giving one example of a simplistic interpretation given by one of the authors. So he says, I think this is by Edwin Brent. So in this he says, what is prayatna shaithilya? The practice of asana involves a level of pain at first. After a time, this disappears by complete relaxation into the pose. This is the interpretation that is given. So what is the meaning here? When we think any physical activity as such, initially when we do it, it will be strainful. For example, I have taken a resolve, New Year resolve, that I will do jogging. So I start jogging. January 2nd, I do jogging. On the first day, yes, it will be painful. Thighs, legs, everything will be painful. Then as I continue, if I continue for the next few days, gradually I can ease into the jogging. Then I even forget that I'm doing jogging. So this is what is prayatna shaithilya, according to this interpreter who has given this commentary. This English translation that we find. Is this prayatna shaithilya? Is this not a common knowledge? Should Patanjali come and tell us that whatever physical activity you do, initially it will be strenuous. As you practice, you will forget that you are even doing this activity. Is there anything new? Is there anything insightful? Is it a technique to make the asana sthira sukha? Does all these get explained by this interpretation? Unfortunately, no. But when we go into the commentary literature, we have rich insights on what prayatna shaithilya actually is. We have, as I listed, a host of commentaries. When I saw a few commentaries, then there are wonderful ideas on prayatna shaithilya. So a set of commentators like Vijnana Bhikshu and others, they say, what is prayatna shaithilya? I'm just giving one example. I treat it in detail and then I will go ahead. So what is prayatna shaithilya? One set of commentators beginning from Vijnana Bhikshu, they say, prayatna here refers to bahu vyapara, exerting oneself too much. Tasya shaithilyam nivaranam. Before the practice of asana, I should not strain myself too much. If the yoga hall is in the 4th floor, I run all the 4th floor, 4 floors, and then immediately jump into yoga practice. No, it should not be done. Means there should be no bahu vyapara before the commencement of asana. You should relax. Your breath should settle down, and in a relaxed, kind of calm and composed manner, you should start yoga. Only then there will be sthira and sukha. If we are overworked, if we exert ourselves too much and then commence asana, then we will see that there will be no stability. Our limbs will start trembling. So sthira sukha will not be achieved. So slackening, too much of an exertion before the practice of asana is prayatna shaithilya. If you do this, then this technique helps you to make your asana sthira sukha. Then another set of commentators say, what is prayatna shaithilya? Prayatna shaithilya is samsiddhika prayatna shaithilyam. What is this? So prayatna here is defined as samsiddhika prayatna. What is samsiddhika prayatna? Samsiddhika here refers to casual effort. So relaxation of casual effort means normally when we are sitting, when we can just right away check our position. We are all sitting. How are we seated? We are casually seated. Our back is bent and our neck is not straight, our spine is not erect, shoulders are not relaxed. Sometimes, so we are not aware of how we are sitting. So there is lack of awareness how we are sitting. So casualness is the prayatna here. Casualness in the effort is the prayatna here. Casualness should be slackened, which means one should follow all prescribed rules. For example, for Padmasana, what should be done? You have to be seated, spine erect, shoulders relaxed, chin down. One leg has to be placed on the other thigh, and the other leg has to be placed on the opposite thigh. So all these are the rules. These are the prescribed prayatnas. So one should slacken casual prayatna and one should adhere to prescribed prayatna. Then that is prayatna shaithilya, and this happens during the practice. So when one adheres to this technique during the practice, then asana becomes sthira and sukha. We can observe that if we are seated in a casual way, we keep shifting our position. When we are watching a TV, we can observe ourselves that we are not concerned about how we are sitting. Then we will be moving from one position to the other constantly. But whereas, so that is not, there is no sthira and sukha there. Whereas when we are aware of how we are seated, then when we follow all the prescribed steps for seating or positioning ourselves in an asana, then we are firm and comfortable. So hence this is a technique to achieve sthira and sukha state. And then after reaching the asana position, Shankara in his Vivarana commentary says, asana bandhottara kalam prayatna karanam. So for example, I just gave the example of Padmasana. So after reaching the Padmasana, I should not do any further movement of the limbs. So that is prayatna shaithilya. So prayatna here refers to efforts after reaching the prescribed asana, and then shaithilya means slackening of any further effort after reaching the prescribed configuration of the asana. So this interpretation by another set of commentaries beginning from Shankaracharya mentions about applying the technique of prayatna shaithilya on reaching the particular asana. So when we look into the Samskrita commentaries, what we see here is that it is a pervasive technique. Prayatna shaithilya becomes a pervasive technique. Before the commencement of asana, avoid strenuous work. During the practice of asana, practice with full focus, avoid casualness. After reaching the particular configuration of the asana, stay motionless. So these are the techniques from before, during and after reaching the position, which is called as prayatna shaithilya, which makes the asana sthira and sukha. Only when asana becomes sthira and sukha, one can progress to pranayama, dhyana, etc. So this is the richness. So the problem of simplistic interpretations, the problem of fanciful interpretation will be avoided if we go into the Samskrita commentary literature. And we from this interpretation we saw There is nothing fanciful about this Samskrita interpretation. And we see, though there are multiple views, they are complementary to each other. Each of them fit in beautifully and assist the practice. And normally there is a notion that the knowledge of Samskrita is theoretical and very difficult to apply. This is a very much practical knowledge which can be put into use with much efficiency, which will actually aid the outcome of asana better. So, and as I mentioned earlier, this input from the Samskrita literature is not on any philosophical dimension. Of course, the philosophy of Samskrita, the knowledge, philosophical knowledge in Samskrita lore is also great. On these practical aspects of asana also, we find such wonderful, insightful, and efficiency augmenting inputs from Samskrita lore. And there are much more such examples which can be presented, which will help solve the many problems. I'm just skipping those ideas. I will just the second aspect of it is the advantages. So advantages of practicing or the advantages of consulting Samskrita commentaries are too numerous. I was invited for a lecture by the Kanchipuram University on organized by ICPR. So I presented a paper where I just listed out 10 advantages of Samskrita commentaries on Yoga Sutra. In what way they help, the why of it, we are thinking of it, in what way they augment clarity. So one is the Vyasa's commentary. Just considered only one commentary on Yoga Sutra. So Vyasa's commentary helps in understanding the Yoga Sutra's concepts with preciseness. And then there is a clarity on what is important and what is subordinate. Gauna mukhyatva avagatihi, loka drishti nivrittihi, shastra drishyadhanam, removing the general perception and then providing a technical contextual understanding. So exactly what we saw about Prayatna Shaithilya is one such classical example. The general simplistic understanding has to be overcome, and then what is the contextual meaning? So that is brought about by the commentary literature. And Kaimarthyam, the purpose, rationale of doing each and everything. So for example, there is aparigraha. The practice of aparigraha is mentioned in Yoga Sutra. Why should one do aparigraha? That is, which is part of yamas. As part of yamas, we have ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, aparigraha. So aparigraha, the why of it is explained in the commentary. Arjana rakshana kshaya sangha dosha darshanat aparigraha anushtheyaha. Arjana, we keep earning. Then once we start earning from the practice, from the point of view of a yoga practitioner, as he earns more and more, then the commitments increase, then one cannot stop earning. So one has to, the EMIs will, the notification for EMIs will keep coming. So hence we have to fill up all those EMIs. So Arjanam, once we start earning, we cannot stop earning. Then Rakshanam, what has been earned has to be protected. I have to safeguard it. I have to put a fixed deposit, invest it, grow it. All these issues are there. Then when am I going to do pranayama? When am I going to do asana? When am I going to improve the quality of life? The real quality of life. Okay. So Arjana, Rakshana, Kshaya. One day or the other, what we have earned will go away. So again, that will lead to suffering. So and Sangha, we develop attachment with what we have earned. The beautifully brick by brick I built this house. Brick by brick I developed this department. So all those attachments we start developing as we earn more and more. So I'm just giving one example as to how the commentary literature explains the purpose of each and every practice. It doesn't say simply, okay, this is aparigraha, you practice. So this is the why of it. See, when we don't take up aparigraha, then there is proliferation of chitta vrittis. Yoga is for chitta vritti nirodha. How do you reduce chitta vrittis? So by gradually taking into the practice of aparigraha, gradually the chitta vrittis come down. It is not only by meditation that chitta vrittis come down. All these preparations have to be done. And how do we get this clarity? We get the clarity from the commentaries which explain the kaimarthya, the purpose, the rationale behind each and every practice that is done. And then Sankshepartha Vistara, expanding of brief mentions, and then Shastra Istihasa Spashtata, Apratipatti Nivaranam, Drishtanta Upadanam, Sandeha Nivrittaye Vaishishtya Pradarshanam, Nana Paksha Parichayaha. I have just listed only 10 of the benefits of study of the commentary literature, and many more can be added. I will give one more example. So I gave one example related to asana in connection to problems. I will give only one example in connection to pranayama, another practical limb of yoga with regard to the richness of insights from the Samskrita lore. This is again very critical, very fundamental aspect and practical aspect. And the previous one was an example from Patanjala Yoga or Raja Yoga. Now this is an example from the Hatha Yoga. So as this talk is about various yoga traditions, so the first example was connected to the Raja Yoga tradition, how the without consulting the commentary lore, without consulting the Samskrita lore, how the interpretations become simplistic, we saw. Now if we consult the commentaries with regard to the Hatha Yoga dimension, which is popular worldwide, how rich the insights, how practically rich insights we get. So this is from Hatha Yoga Pradipika 2.18, verse 2.18, where we see, we know everyone, there is no one who will not know the limbs of pranayama. There is Puraka, there is Rechaka and Kumbhaka. Inhalation, exhalation and retention of breath. So this verse says, how should the inhalation, exhalation and retention of breath should be? Basic concept. It says, yuktam yuktam tyajed vayum, yuktam yuktam cha purayet, yuktam yuktam cha badniyat, evam siddhim avapnuyat. It's a very simple and a rhyming shloka with a lot of repetition. So what does it, how does the translation, standard translation, how does it say, what does it say? Gradually inhale, yuktam yuktam purayet, gradually inhale, gradually exhale, yuktam yuktam tyajet, gradually inhale, yuktam yuktam purayet, and yuktam yuktam badhniyat. Restrain gradually. Thus you attain siddhi. What is gradual? What is gradual inhalation? What is gradual exhalation? And what is gradual holding? The translation does not shed any light. Then how do we reach siddhi? So it says, if you do this, you will attain siddhi in pranayama, which is dirgha sukshma prana, the making the breath long and subtle. How will we achieve when we do it only gradually? What is the understanding of gradual? So then when we come into the commentary literature, then that yuktam is beautifully, the idea behind that, there is richness of insight. We see what is yuktam in the context of exhalation. Yuktam, as you can see in the commentary, yuktam iti vayum pranam yuktam tyajet rechanakale shanaihi eva rechayet na vegataha ityarthaha. So what is yuktam in the context of exhalation? Shanaihi. Slowly means slow exhalation is yuktam tyajet. Then what is yuktam in the context of inhalation? Yuktam cha, nacha alpam, nacha adhikam cha purayet. How should inhalation be? Inhalation should neither be too much or nor should it be too less, according to one's inhaling capacity. So the word is same, yuktam is same, but the meaning is different in the context of inhalation. And then what is yuktam badhniyat? Badhniyat refers to yuktam cha jalandhara bandhadi yuktam badhniyat kumbhayet. There is jalandhara bandha, udyana bandha, mula bandha. After inhaling and holding the breath within, we have to do these three bandhas. A kumbhaka which is accompanied by the three bandhas alone becomes the appropriate kumbhaka. So that is yuktam in the context of holding the breath. Then yuktam in the context of inhale refers to the quantity, na alpam na adhikam. While exhalation yuktam means the pace, not fast. It should be slow. And then while holding, it refers to practice of the kumbhaka with the bandhas. So though the words are repetitive, when we enter deeper into the commentary lore, we unearth rich insights. Again, these are very practical, and these techniques are to be practiced. What happens when one inhales too much beyond one's capacity? Then there is breathlessness. Hikka, shwasascha, kasascha, shirah, karnakshi, vedana. All problems, they manifest. Hiccups will start. Shwasa, loss of breath. Kasa, there will be asthma. And then shiraha, karna, akshi, vedana. All these head pain in the head, pain in the ears, pain in the eyes. All these happen. So to have a painless, useful and a beneficial practice, then we have to dig into, or we have to go into the commentary literature. So in this way, we have seen three aspects: the what of the what of Samskrita in yoga shastra, how much is there in Samskrita with regard to yoga shastra, the why of it we saw. Both the problems and also the advantages that we saw. Now we will see the desideratum. So these are the significance. In the opening title, I said Samskrita and yoga, significance and desideratum. So we have spent some time on the significance aspect of it. Now let us briefly look into the desideratum. Now when we see with regard to the studies and research and the Samskrita being integrated with regard to yoga, we see Samskrita textual studies, unfortunately, are not seriously pursued, not even in the master's degree. I know certain universities that offer yoga degree, they don't even have yoga sutras, let alone having Samskrita as a subject. They have derived something from the Yoga Sutra and put it there. So even without the study of Yoga Sutras, degrees are on offer on even master's level. So and even when we see in other universities where at least Samskrita is a subject in the master's degree or undergraduate degree, only that is in a detached manner, not in an applied manner. So another paper has to be cleared by the student, and he clears and leaves. No connection between Samskrita and the textual study as such is applied in an applied manner. It is not taught. Not many certificate programs or workshops or special study groups, not in yoga universities, or not even in many of the traditional centers of yoga. They also have become practice oriented, but the theory aspect of it, which is firmly established in these Samskrita literature, they are not touched upon even in traditional yoga institutions, nor in the conventional university setup. And this is about the studies aspect of it. Even in deemed universities on yoga itself, we don't see textual studies department or Samskrita studies department or teaching Samskrita in an applied manner to the students happening. So this is the desideratum with regard to the study of Samskrita. I have observed, I had a discussion with an Ayurveda professor who said that initially what happened to Ayurveda is also happening to yoga. That Ayurveda professor said that initially Ayurveda Vaidya studies had 3 years of Shastra Adhyayana, and then the next 3 years only, that is the Pada Vakya Pramana Shastras, will be studied in the first 3 years by an aspiring Ayurveda Vaidya, all in Samskrita. And then in the next 3 years of his study, he will get into Charaka Sushruta Samhita with the Samskrita commentary of Dalhana and others. So this was how Ayurveda studies were. Then all these were done through translation. Then Samskrita was relegated to just initially 150 hours of study, then 90 hours of Samskrita paper, then 60 hours of Samskrita paper. It's the position of Samskrita gradually shrunk in Ayurveda studies. I do not know the current status in Ayurveda field with regard to Samskrita. It may be the status quo might have been maintained, or it may have worsened, I do not know. But in yoga, it is now when we see yoga entering into the mainstream of education, in the right at the beginning itself, we don't see many degrees being offered through Samskrita itself, and the component of Samskrita itself is not much to be seen in these formal degrees that are being offered. Having seen the significance or the importance of Samskrita already, it is highly disproportionate, or the representation of Samskrita studies is not at all there, which is not going to do any good for the discipline as such. And then with regard to textual research, Samskrita based textual research in yoga, the lesser it is said, the better it is, because with regard to Samskrita based textual studies and research in yoga, basically critical editions have to happen based on the manuscript sources. Newer and newer knowledge have to be brought in. Yoga Sutras and many of the commentaries that I mentioned, they have not yet been critically edited from the manuscripts themselves. The Vyasa Bhashya and other commentaries, they have not yet still been critically edited. So when lower criticism has not happened, then how can we think of higher criticism about analyzing the contribution of each of these commentaries? And so that is also there. And then translation into regional languages. The Samskrita knowledge has to be taken into the regional languages. For that, scholars have to be trained in that field. And when there is certain biased scholarship, which is happening a lot in the West, so there is no one here to counter them also. So because no one cares to go into textual studies and research, and so that is also, there is muted or no response to such biased scholarship and narratives that are being built constantly on yoga. So hence this is the desideratum. And in my past decade of work, in my limited capacity, I have tried a few things I would like to share briefly before ending the talk. So to make the yoga commentaries accessible, this Yoga Vaisharadi, a searchable web repository, about which in the introduction Professor Desai mentioned, you can see this in the link. And then taking the Samskrita commentaries into regional languages, Vyasa Bhashya, the primary commentary, has been translated by me into Tamil. And then focused, refereed, peer-reviewed textual papers on the textual wealth, the Samskrita textual wealth on yoga has to be done, especially on the commentary literature. I have done a few, some 10-12 papers I have done in that direction. More should happen. And then innovate means material also have to be created to take Samskrita in an applied manner to the students of yoga. So in that direction, Yogasya Bhasha, that was also mentioned, a 4-part learning material was created. And then innovation has to happen in the teaching methodology also. The teaching methodology should also be innovative or inviting and attractive, so that the notion that Samskrita is difficult, Samskrita is complicated is overcome. So this is a glimpse of the Yoga Vaisharadi website that I developed. So many commentaries are digitally searchable. Whichever term we want, we can search. And this is the translation of Vyasa Bhashya into Tamil. And then this is Yogasya Bhasha, where in an applied manner, yogic yoga is taught through Samskrita. The basics of those who get into the Samskrita Sambhashana practices, gradually leading them with examples from yoga lore to the understanding of Yoga Sutra through Samskrita itself. So this is the 4-part Yogasya Bhasha. And of course, various immersive methodologies on Hatha Yoga and others we have attempted and has been documented in research papers also, imparting yoga texts in Sanskrita, a teaching experiment and its outcome. But only a little has been done. More concerted effort, systematic effort, organized effort, well funded, long-term effort needs to be done. And finally, I will end with one verse from again Vyasa Bhashya. I began with a verse from Vyasa Bhashya. I end with a verse from Vyasa Bhashya. Normally, everyone would want to add value to what they are doing. So we see yoga, we are speaking about yoga. So we have to go from yoga to Uttama Yoga. All of us are doing yoga. All of us are connected with yoga. So we would want to do Uttama Yoga. So how to move from yoga to Uttama Yoga? To that, Vyasa in his commentary to Yoga Sutra 1.48 says, Agamena, Anumanena, Dhyana Abhyasa Rasena cha, Tridha Prakalpayan Prajnam, Labhate Yogam Uttamam. So, Uttama Yoga, how can it be reached? Agamena, by authentic textual study, the study or exploration, understanding of the agamas, the authentic sources of knowledge, the shastras, the texts, and then anumana, not merely receiving what has been handed down, anumana, doing one's own inferences, thinking over it, both empirical and also inferential, doing that anumana, and then what has been understood by the inferential processes self in the light of one's own experience, abhyasa rasa, finding the joy in practice. So authentic knowledge, receiving it, and then inferences, developing inferences and understanding, and what has been understood has to be joyfully put into practice. This is how one moves from yoga to Uttama Yoga, and at the foundation of this is Agama, authentic knowledge, authentic textual knowledge, and the cornerstone of textual knowledge in yoga lies in Samskrita. So the study of Samskrita systematically in an applied manner, and also the unearthing of wisdom from Samskrita lore will strengthen the fundamental stepping stone towards the Uttama Yoga, and the next steps can also become better if this Agama based on Samskrita studies in connection to yoga happens well. And the great centers like the Center for Excellence in Indian Knowledge System in IIT Kharagpur can do a lot in supporting such efforts, in helping this Samskrita knowledge system, that is yoga, towards its journey to Uttama Yoga. With this, I end my talk here. Thank you very much. Dhanyavada.
धन्यवाद जयरामन् महोदयः। भगवद्गीता मध्ये अपि किञ्चित् योगस्य अहं स्मरणं करोमि। योगः समत्वं योगमुच्यते इति एवं उक्ति अस्ति। एवं द्वितीयश्लोकः अस्ति, बुद्धियुक्तो जहातिह उभे सुकृतदुष्कृते तस्माद् योगाय युज्यस्व योगः कर्मसु कौशलम्। अस्माकं संस्थानस्य ध्येयवाक्यः अपि अस्ति, योगः कर्मसु कौशलम्। तस्य संगे अन्य एकः अस्ति, तपस्विभ्यो धिको योगी ज्ञानिभ्योऽपि मतोऽधिकः कर्मिभ्यश्चाधिको योगी तस्माद् योगी भवार्जुन इति। तो एतत् अस्ति भारतीय प्रौद्योगिकी संस्थानस्य मुखान्तरे अहं डॉक्टर जयरामन् महादेवन् महाभागस्य बहु कृतज्ञतां समर्पयामि। अधुना वयं let us go for any question answer, quick question answer if any of you have. So we can take a few questions.
If anybody would like to ask a
Yeah.
question, yes, I'd like you to kindly unmute. Kuldeepji, would you like to moderate the questions part of it and see if there's any?
No, ma'am, please go ahead. I was just telling the same thing.
नहीं नहीं आप बताइए. Are there any questions, specific questions for Dr. Jayaraman?
Yes, may I ask a question to Dr. Jayaraman?
Please, Harimonji.
Is there a role that silence plays in yoga? They say Maunam Vidvanam Bhuttam. So what is the role of silence in yoga?
Yoga, there are yoga. Silence is the goal and also the means to yoga. Means in yoga, silence is both the means and also end in yoga. Chitta vritti nirodha, absolute cessation of all vrittis, is the end of yoga, and that is the absolute silence which leads to great bliss. So that is the ultimate kashta mauna towards which we are traveling, and towards that I happened to read a PhD thesis. It came to me for evaluation, where this wonderful idea, I had never thought of chittavritti nirodha as mauna, and that scholar had written it that way. So that dimension was very interesting, because we think about mauna only at the level of the speech, but only when the mind settles down, the real silence comes. So chittavritti nirodha, which is the goal, or which is the end, which is the goal of yoga, is the silence, and towards that the relative silence also helps. For example, we have the limbs like tapas in Kriya Yoga. Tapas swadhyaya ishvara pranidhanani Kriya Yoga. There the word tapas is there, disciplining oneself. So there can be various ways in which one can discipline oneself by disciplining one's food intake. That's where one begins, and by disciplining the way in which one speaks, what to speak and what not to speak, restricting, refining one's speech. So in that sense, in the context of tapas, then it becomes a means. So when considered as a part of yoga, as a means, tapas is means will lead to that ultimate silence, and tapas is a relative silence which helps towards that.
Dhanyavad.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
Okay, I have two questions. My first question is how neuroscience explains yoga and meditation. And my second question is there any way in which neuroscience, psychoanalysis, and Sanskrit literature are related?
Thank you, madam, for asking this question, about which I cannot answer anything because I am a textual research person, in the sense that all these are the areas which need to be explored, in the sense that directly in what way neuroscience is connected to yoga, which has to be explored, and only when scholars of neuroscience and the scholars of textual studies of yoga sit together, we can work it out, and there are no ready-made answers from me on this. Whereas one can look into these portals like PubMed, etc., where one can find, because this empirical study in yoga is happening nearly for a century, right from 1920s, started by Kaivalya Dhama, Swami Kuvalayananda, until now. Lots of papers are being published. One can look into that. A bibliometric study on the number of papers on yoga, on empirical aspects, has gone up really well. So hence there will certainly be papers, one can look into it.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Nilanjana ji, would you like to unmute and ask your question? I'll just see if I can find. Are you able to unmute? I'm trying to find your question. Nilanjana ji, can you unmute and ask? Yeah. Okay, let me see. I'll try and see. So she says that thanks a lot, sir, for the enlightening and blissful talk. In today's world, yoga is mostly concerned with physical well-being, deviating from the yogic holistic One second. Yogic holistic.
See epistemology.
Yeah, can you see that holistic epistemology? Can you read
Yeah,
the
yeah.
question, please? Because my
Yeah, yeah.
screen is jumping.
Yogic holistic epistemology. So it is becoming reductionist, and if the bioethics and biopolitics are influencing this reduction, should humanities have any approach to the holistic flowering of yoga? These are wonderful terms: bioethics, biopolitics, all these terms. I am yet to understand the meaning of all these things, but the systematic way in which, means the way in which yoga can blossom. The only word that I understood better in that question is flowering, blossoming. So blossoming of yogic knowledge can happen when the ambience is created in such a manner. The Guru Shishya Parampara is facilitated in such a manner that the exchange can happen without any concerns of the consumeristic kind of approach. So if it happens in that peaceful Guru Shishya Parampara mode, then all these so-called concerns can be addressed better.
Doctor, may I say something here?
Yes, sir.
Isn't yoga entirely an individualistic? Needs an individualistic approach. It's a approach of Atman. It's not a collective thing. Yoga can never be collective. Am I right? It is the approach of Atma. So approach of Swa actually. No two persons can do yoga. Correct?
It is said that ekas tapaha dviradhyayi. While studying, while learning, two or more people are there, and tapaha is done by one. Yoga in the real sense, it's an individual journey. And when we study, try to understand about it, it can happen in a, means yoga learning in a group can happen. But yoga sadhana, if it is tapas in the real sense, then it is an individual journey, voyage.
Dr. Pillai, if I could just, Dr. Jayaraman, with your permission, just add another dimension to this discussion, because coming from the integral yoga tradition, Sri Aurobindo somehow lays a lot of emphasis also on the collective sadhana, because he says that down in the subconscious there is a lot of commonalities in the tendencies of human nature. So unless we are working on yoga also collectively, it will always remain partial in terms of its complete realization. This is what Sri Aurobindo contributes, and that's why there is a lot of emphasis of satsanga, a lot of emphasis on collective, finding people, finding communities that are trying similar efforts in order to overcome their own limitations. So while on one side, it's absolutely true that yoga is an individual effort, but I think one would not do justice to the entire scope of the yoga tradition if one limited it only to the individual's progress, or as an individual effort, and not take into account the importance that the collective plays in uplifting even the individual in his sadhana.
So yoga is not for sannyasa but for the grahastha.
And something actually I would like to go back even before Aurobindo, and I here recall what Swami Vivekananda used to say about Sri Ramakrishna. He said that Ramakrishna had actually awakened the Brahma Kundalini. So that was the collective Kundalini, as it were. While we generally talk about the individual Kundalini, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa actually awakened the collective Kundalini. And I think there was also a question regarding the connection between yoga and the neurosciences. In fact, a lot of work is being done. I just saw it. There is one paper published in, I think, Neurology India. They cited one of my books as well. So it's a PubMed journal, and they have actually tried to, there are some doctors from Harvard. So they tried to establish some kind of connection between the neurosciences and in the tantric concept of speech. That was what Professor Joyson was also discussing, I think, in some previous session. So where you have this fourfold concept of Bach. So Parapashyanti, Madhyama, Vaikhari, etc. So some neuroscientists are trying to establish some connection between that kind of structure and the way we understand, the neurosciences today?
With regard to, yeah, I'll just add one thing. The important thing that needs to be looked into when we try to validate yogic practices with the scientific measures is an interface should be created between the scholars of Samskrita and the practice and scientists as such. Without the that interface or the connection, means authentic knowledge cannot be translated into scientifically established truths or verifiable truths. So in that sense, a lot of work needs to be done if we work on creating that interface between Samskrita scholars and scientists, or rather creating studies in such a way that it combines both. Then it will be beneficial. Or else what happens is, there is I have reviewed, means I've studied many scientific papers where we see there is very scant reference to what the texts say. As I have presented, they just hold on to one technique and try to bring out extract as much of juice as possible, whereas there is so much more there in the Samskrita lore to be. Only the connection between the Samskrita scholars and those in Samskrita in scientific this thing happens, that interface happens, that needs to be done. Then any science can be connected with yoga, because yoga is about mind. So mind, the role of mind is there in each and every discipline. So on the other day, I was invited a couple of years ago on prenatal education and yoga. Initially, I thought, no, I don't have any insight. How can I am just a Samskrita person looking into the meaning of interpretation, various layers of interpretation of Yoga Sutra. Then how can I speak on prenatal education and yoga? Then I had to accept that challenge. And then when I started studying for that paper, for that presentation, I understood that yoga is all about mind. As the mother who is expecting a child, so she also has a mind. So that mind also needs some solace, training. So for any mind, for a soldier in the war front, he also has a mind. So he can also be trained. So yoga is applicable across the disciplines if we care to kind of create that interface with the appropriate instrumentation or the methodologies.
Yes. We have Professor Joysin. One second. We have Professor Joysin, who is the chairperson of the Center of Excellence for Indian Knowledge Systems, who would like to say something. So we're very grateful that he's been able to join despite being in Kolkata and traveling and all. So Professor Joysin, would you please like to unmute and share your thoughts?
Yeah. Dr. Chaudhary, am I audible? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So, Dr. Jayaraman, late, and I was hit by the spectrum and the vastness of Sant Dattatreya Dakshinatji on the one hand, to the text of Vyasa, Valmiki, Gita. So I was really amazed by the spectrum of Yoga Shastra, the Yoga Shastra, which was mentioned. And the beautiful thing that I saw in Dr. Jayaraman's talk is that there was both Yoga Darshana and also Yoga Sadhana. It was just not intellectual, but it was also practitioner. It is the way. It's, as Swami Vivekananda is saying, it's being and becoming. It's just not being. It's just not being, but it's becoming that being which you believe. So Brahma Vida Brahma Iva Bhavati. So by aspiring for the Brahman, the yogi finally becomes Brahma Sharupa. So that is the highest level of Indian spirituality, which is so evident in today's brilliant talk. And it came out again and again and I think India's greatest contribution to the world is yoga. I think of all the domains of Indian knowledge system, the greatest contribution of India to the entire humanity is yoga. You look at the 5,000 years, 6,000 years, 7,000 years seals of Indus Valley, and today about 16 or 17 variety of yogic mudras and postures has been discovered in Indus Valley alone, which means the Indus Valley settlers already knew about 7 to 8 or maybe more than 10 systems of yoga, like Hatha Yoga, Raja Yoga, Kriya Yoga. So which shows that around 5000 BC or 4000 BC or so, yoga was already a diversified practice tradition in India, So probably the origin of yoga is much older than that. And it's really a wonderful thing to see one of our experts in Indian knowledge system, Professor Desai, to be in charge of this session. And also my Dada, my elder brother, Dr. Harimohan Pillai, who is one of the forerunners, way back in 1999 when we had nothing. There was absolute opposition wherever we were. Then I had one person with me, going before me and after me. That was Dr. Harimohan Pillai. Today things have become easier. When Swami Vivekananda had gone to the United States of America, the resistance was highest. When Gurudev Rabindranath got the Gitanjali Nobel Prize, the resistance decreased a little bit. By the time the Life Divine had entered the US thing, hello.
Professor Jason, we can hear you. We can hear you. I can't see, but we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. So by the time the Life Divine had entered the US and Dr. Haridas Chaudhuri had taken a copy of the Life Divine to the United States of America, yoga was already accepted by a huge scholarship in the West, including the disciples of Carl Gustav Jung, like Abraham Maslow and others. So there's a long story, and today yoga is more practiced in the West. If we move in the streets of Indian cities, we find more video parlors and cyber cafes. But if you move in the streets of London or San Francisco, you find more yoga cafes and shops on yoga. So yoga is more popular, but the kind of yoga which is popular in the West is mostly Hatha Yoga, not Raj Yoga, which is the yoga of yogas, which is at the mental and at the supramental level. And I was really enjoying this beautiful question. I mean, Professor Pillai knows the answer, but he raised that question, whether yoga is individual or whether yoga is collective. Yoga is always an individual pursuit, and it's an individual attainment to begin with. You become a Yogeshwara, but finally you become a Maha Yogeshwara when you become a cosmic personality. Because one of the definitions, Anuradha was already saying that one of the definitions of Sri Aurobindo is that what is yoga, and Sri Aurobindo said it is the destruction of individual personality and it is the construction of universal cosmic personality. So from Aham Chaitanya you move to Mahat Chaitanya, and then from Mahat you move to Mahata Mahoriyan, as per the Shetashtra Upanishad or the Katha Upanishad. So from Aham to Mahat, and these are the words of Sri Aurobindo, and it's all over there in Life Divine and other texts. And these are also the words of Sri Ramakrishna. He has talked about these levels. So from Aham to Mahat, and from Mahat to Mahata Mahoriyan. So there's a beautiful expanse and the possibility. I think I don't want to give another lecture here, but I'll stop. And I think we must pay our pranam to Dr. Jayaraman to encourage the centrality of Indian knowledge system, because all the other domains of Indian knowledge systems, Professor Jayaraman, they're all intellectual. But it is yoga which makes us a living being. Because if I'm first a yogi and then I'm a pursuit of Artha Shastra, then I understand Indian knowledge system. If I'm first a yogi or a practitioner of yoga and then I practice Nyaya Shastra, then I am a proper member of Indian knowledge system. So Tatastha, the centrality of Indian knowledge system is yoga, and all the other things, whether it's Vastu Shastra or Artha Shastra or Nyaya Shastra, they're all the peripheries. So it is yoga which makes the mind calm, the presence of mind. And I think we need to have Professor Dr. Jayaraman coming to us again and again in the days and the months and the years to come, so that, sir, we hear more from you, and clarity of thought will come from your repetitive and recursive presence. And Dr. Anuradha Chaudhuri is the best instrument to do that. She's like a Wizard of Oz. She has got about 100 horsepower, Shahasra Ashra Bahini, as for the Rig Veda, the sages are saying, the sages are marching towards the Shurja Mandala like 1,000 horses. Now, they don't talk about the material horses, but they're talking about the divine Ashwapati, the horse power, the spiritual horse, where the horse is a symbol of prana, Shuddha prana, Vidyut Shakti, Baji Karana. So this is, so I think that knowledge will come from you. And just not a lecture of today. I mean, Professor Jayaraman, we need your kind presence again and again. So I'm making a humble presence, and the future of the system will be in the hands of Anuradha, Annay, and all the young stalwarts. So you come here, you come to IIT Kharagpur, and you bless them, and you introduce us to all the sectors of yoga. So I think we should give it to Professor Desai. If there are any other questions, to actually assimilate and say the final words. Thank you. Pranam.
Thank you. I would like to say something, please, if time permits.
Just, if I may, if you don't mind, we have Dr. Trehan from the Satya Yuga Darshana. He's from the Satya Yuga Darshan Institute of Engineering and Technology. He's the director of that institute, and he had requested to say a few words. So if you don't mind, I'll just request him to say a few words. Sir, if you'd kindly unmute and share your thoughts.
Sarvebhyo Namo Namaha. Am I audible, please?
Yes,
Dr. Trehan. It's her, yes. Request you to please.
Yeah, it's me. I'm she. My name is Sangeeta.
Yes, gotcha.
So Sarvebhyo Namo Namaha. Naikaah Mahabhagaah Prastutaah Atra. Dr. Jayaraman, Dr. Joy Sen, Dr. Harimohan Pillai, Dr. Anuradha cha, Anye cha Bahavaha Manishinaha Yoginascha Santi. Sarvebhyo Mama Namaskarah. Aham Faridabadastha Satyug Darshan Ityakhyasya Mahavidyalayasya Nideshika Asmi. Vishesh Dhanyavadaah to Dr. Jayaraman Mahabhagaya. Vastutaha Adya Asmakam Chitta Prasadaha Hridaya Prasado Cha Jataha. So I tried my tongue at some of Sanskrit, like Professor Jayaraman was saying. At least initially we should try a few lines in Sanskrit because we are here to celebrate Sanskrit week, and why just week? We are here to celebrate Sanskrit as such. So I'm truly delighted at the talk, and many thanks to the organizers of this great event, to of course the speaker, the eminent speaker, and all the entire team members. I just thought I just couldn't stop myself from sharing a recent experience because I could relate to each and every word that Professor Raman was saying. Actually, I was attending these YCB sessions which were organized by TCS Yoga, Tata Consultancy Services. I happen to be, actually my husband works for TCS. So so TCS had started this yoga certification drive for TCS comrades and families. So that's how I got associated with it. So, so during those sessions that we had, and during the preparation of that, there is I got to know of a lot of materials which are there in the popular which are there in popular circulation, which help people prepare for these YCB circulation L1, L2, L3, etc. Now, like Professor Raman was emphasizing that all these, how somehow all this real interpretation of yoga, which is emanating from the real texts, they should percolate down to the masses. So towards the end of that program, we were introduced to one book by, Mr. Satpal Khichar, which I believe is very popular. It is an MCQ series. And while we were studying with that book, we realized that, it could be improved. The author had done a great job rather, by collating lots of MCQs. The book is called Yoga MCQ Series, multiple choice questions, and it is used for certification of YCB, UGC NET, JRF, MSc Yoga, PhD entrance exam, and so on and so forth. So it's like a question bank. But while I was studying for that, I actually happened to proofread it a little bit. So I could find myself, I mean, I thought that this is a project that we should undertake. I mean, with, of course, proper guidance, with the, people who have complete understanding, better understanding, in-depth understanding, where we can even provide references. Because there's a lot of material, a lot of concepts are there. We need authentic, references for that. That was one aspect. Then also we decided we are going to build a mobile app, which because TCS is promoting yoga in a big way, and it's becoming popular, and more TCS associates, they are taking it up, and I am also associated with them, and I've pledged all my help with them, in whatever capacity I can. So I thought I'm just utilizing this forum because somewhere it gels with the theme of which Professor Raman was also saying. So it is kind of an open invitation to all the eminent scholars, and all the Sanskritists and all the scholars who are here, and all the directors and all the college leaders. It's an open invitation. If you would like to associate with me, and so there is somebody from TCS also. They are also contemplating all this. So we are actually thinking of creating some learning materials which are easy also, but which are more authentic than, for example, the MCQ book that I refer to. So I just thought I'll take this as an opportunity. I've put my email in the chat box. So please, if anybody wants to get to me, kindly, you can reach out to me using that email. I can also leave my number and all with Anuradha ji and whoever is interested. So let us make a beginning towards making things better. I thought this was one way we can make, this like textual based studies that Professor Raman was saying. This is exactly what I was saying, because there were many questions there which were sometimes ambiguous, which required more interpretation, and a person and a student like me was more curious to know what is the source of this answer, because they have just given the right answer, and I'm not convinced, or at least I want to know what is the authentic source. So that is a task which is is crying for our attention, I think. And I would really appreciate if there are any volunteers, if there are any people in this gentle gentry who would like to come forward and associate with this noble task. Thank you very much.
Dhanyavada, Mahodaya. Tari, we definitely look forward to see how we can collaborate and take this much required work forward. So thank you very much for making this offer openly, so that all those who are interested can network and take these much required works, as I said, ahead. So it's time. I mean, we're well beyond time. In fact, not just it's time, but it has been a very engaging session, and there have been a lot of discussions. I'm wondering if I should just take my privilege of being the organizer of this to ask one last very important question about the term yogi itself. If you would just, in a nutshell, maybe in a sentence or two, just because it is used so easily, it's just like, I'm a yogi because I'm on a mat for 2 minutes. Is that something that you would like to elaborate on, or is that something for another time? Jayaraman brother.
So this is again, I can just remember for example, for other shastras, the Vyakarana. So Vyakarana is the discipline, and a person connected to that is called as Vyakarana. And then Nayayika, Nyaya Shastra is there, and Nayayika. And similarly, Yoga Shastra is there, then we call it Yogi. So in what way these terms are derived? We see that tad adhite tad veda. Tad adhite tad veda. So Nyaya Shastram adhite, Nyaya Shastram vedava, saha Nayayikaha. Whoever is studying Nyaya Shastra, or whoever has mastered Nyaya Shastra, both of them are called as Nayayikas. So it covers the entire spectrum. So a beginner, just now I started with my Tarka Sangraha lessons. So he is also a Nayayika or a Tarkika. And then the one who has mastered till Gadadhari and other higher texts, he is also a Nayayika. So I think the word yogi should also be taken in that sense, that beginning from the lower end of the spectrum, till the higher end of the spectrum, the realized one. So it covers the entire framework, but the entire spectrum it covers. But whoever wants to call himself a yogi should appropriately plot himself in the graph as to which end he belongs to.
Dhanyawada Brata. I would like to request Professor Desai. Sorry.
धन्यवादः अहं गीता मध्ये द्वे श्लोकद्वयानि सन्ति प्रथमश्लोकः अस्ति तृतीय अध्याय मध्ये इन्द्रियाणि पराण्याहुः इन्द्रियेभ्यः परः मनः मनसस्तु परा बुद्धिर् यो बुद्धे परतस्तु सः. So Dr. Pillai asked a question about this one neurology. I think Dr. Pillai, I believe. So that is the thing. So that is indriyas. That is indriyas are great, but greater than indriyas is mana or the mind. So greater because mana has a speed. That's why I call mano yoga, mano vega. So then, but mana doesn't have this vivechana shakti. What is good, what is bad. So that is not there. Mana simply gets attracted towards something which is more this one. That is flashy things. So, but buddhi, it has a vivechana shakti. What is good, what is bad, what is less, what is more, what is. So therefore, buddhi, manasastu para buddhi. And then it is yo buddhe paratastu saha. Saha means here it is atmam. So that is chitta vritti nirodha. So that is why. So therefore, that is in the tritiya shloka. And then in the saptama shloka, there is a description of prakriti. That is bhumirapo nalo vayo khammano buddhirevacha ahankaram itiyam me bhinna prakritirashtada. So here, that is prakriti or nature. So it is two-way. The first is the bahya prakriti, that is bhumi, apa, anala, vayu, kham. Kham is akasha or space. So this is bahya prakriti. Then it moves on to antarika prakriti, that is internal nature. That is mano, buddhi, and then last is ahankar. So therefore this one. So that is in fact Shankaracharya, Adi Shankaracharya Virichita. This Atma Shatka, Nirvana Shatka, Prathama Shlokasya Prathama Pankti says Mano Buddhya Hankara Chittani Naham. And then so in every shloka it ends with Chidananda Rupa Shivoham Shivoham. So this is Manas Buddhi Ahankara. So this is this one. So therefore, so this shloka, that is Bhagavad Gita Saptama Adhyaya Madhye, that is Bhumirapo Naravayu Khammano Buddhirevacha Ahankaram itiyam me bhinna prakritirashtada. So therefore this describes bahya prakriti and then antarika prakriti. And then eventually, see, the thing is, if one interesting thing is, all the 18 adhyayas of Bhagavad Gita, so their name ends with yoga. Initially it starts with Arjuna Vishada Yoga, that is Prathama Adhyaya, and then Antima Adhyaya is Moksha Sannyasa Yoga. So that means even we say Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya. So like that, we start with Vishada. And then our ultimate aim should be moksha sannyasa yoga. So we should get liberated from everything. So that is, and in fact, Shri Hovesh Sheshadriji, so one of the foremost this one Samaj Sevakas, he was also the Sarkarya of Rashtriya Swayam Sevak Sangh. He used to say, yoga is a thoughtlessness of mind. So therefore, Brahma Nirvanam Richasi. This is also the last sloka of Dvitiya Adhyaya in Bhagavad Gita. So therefore, so basically, so we should also say that Bhagavad Gita, all the 18 Adhyayas are also named after some form of yoga. That is Arjuna Vishada Yoga, Sankhya Yoga, Karma Yoga, then so on. So like that, eventually the last is ultimate. The last Adhyaya is this Moksha Sannyasa Yoga. So we are extremely thankful to Dr. Jayaraman Mahadevan ji as well as all other this one. So for making this event, this one. So and basically, so this is in Bangla. We say that it is said that jog karo. Jog karo means that is join. So basically, yoga is that is joining our body, with our mind, with our intellect, and everything with our self. So, and then again, Dr. Pillai asked about whether the Vyaktigata sadhana and then Samuhika sadhana. So that means from Jivatma to Paramatma, that is Veshti to Samasti, that is from Pinda to Brahmanda. So eventually you should so that is ensure that the moksha of everything, the entire the Jiva Rashi actually. So that is from Jivatma to Paramatma with these as one. So I again, once again, Hritpurvaka Dhanyavadam Samarpayami to Dr. Jayaraman Mahadevanji, and then for all others for spending their valuable time. And then so this is this should we should all so like say Bhagavad Gita, even though it is so small, just 700 or 701 shlokas, if you include the 0th shloka of Kshetra Kshetrajna Yoga. So therefore it gives a lot of insight. And this one, so I'm sure that is it will give a preliminary answer to most of or rather all the questions. So from there we can move on, and then we can connect, and then we can study individually and collectively, and then we can attain our this one that is ultimate goal, that is Antima Laksham. So with this one, so I once again thank Dr. Jayaraman Mahadevanji as well as Dr. Anuradha Chaudhary, Professor Joy Sen, Professor Harimohan Pillai, and all others, and even the lady from Faridabad from Swan, I'm forgetting her name, so that is yeah, I would like to wish everyone Swan Dhanyavada and Shubharatri.
Shubharatri Mode, bahut dhanyavada to you for having accepted to chair the session for us. I'll just come back to Dr. Jayaraman if you have a last message a last something that you would like to conclude the session with. And I request Kuldeep ji to just give any information for the next session also after Dr. Jayaraman's words. Over to you, Dr. Jayaraman.
One last message is Om. I'm not, this is very important because Krishnamacharya, who lived for 100 years, was a great yogi, who was the teacher of yogis like B.K. Sayengar and others. His 100th year celebration was happening. And then people, they asked him, what is the message? It means you have reached by your yoga sadhana, you have lived you are a Purna Acharya. You lived for 100 years. So what is the message that you want to give in the 100th year of your life that we are celebrating? This is what he said. Oh, that's all. He ended his talk there. Means it has multiple various levels of interpretations. That's what he intended.
Oh, dhanyavada. Kuldeep ji, Dr. Joyson, you're saying something?
No, I think I think after that there's nothing. It's eternity. Ananta. Thank you so much, Dr. Jayaraman.
Thank you, sir.
Our pranam.
Thank
Dr.
Thank you, Dr. Jayaraman.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jayaraman, for such a wonderful lecture. It was really inspiring. And I will just like to mention a few things that, there is a lot of buzz around yoga and meditation amongst the youth, and they are joining different courses also. But as you rightly said, that it is very important to connect with the roots, that is the text. And we here are trying to do that in our institute by forming a small club here called Sanskriti Club. And I would like to invite everyone who is interested to please join us and support us in this initiative. We are already having very good guiding light and guiding force with us, Dr. Anuradha Chaudhary, Dr. Joy Sen, Professor V.R. Desai. But we would like everyone to join hands in this efforts so that the youth that is connecting with yoga gets directly connected through Sanskrit language. So with this, I will just share the links. The recordings will be available on YouTube on a channel called Samvad Events, and the Facebook page also I have shared in the chat box. So if anyone has a message or comment, please share with us. With this, I'd like to thank the session chair also, Professor Desai, for chairing the session. Thank you very much.
I'd like to invite Dr. Thank you very much, Kuldeepji. I'd like to invite Dr. Jayaraman to do the Shanti mantra for us, please.
ॐ पृथिवी शान्ता साग्निना शान्ता सामे शान्ता शुचगं शमयतु अन्तरिक्षगं शान्तं तद्वाजुना शान्तं तन्मे शान्तगं शुचगं शमयतु द्यौः शान्ता सादित्येन शान्ता सामे शान्ता शुचगं शमयतु पृथिवी शान्तिरन्तरिक्षगं शान्तिर्द्यौः शान्तिर्दिशः शान्तिरवान्तरदिशाः शान्तिरग्निः शान्तिर्वायुः शान्तिरादित्यः शान्तिश्चन्द्रमाः शान्तिर्नक्षत्राणि शान्तिरापः शान्तिरोषधयः शान्तिर्वनस्पतयः शान्तिर्गौः शान्तिरजा शान्तिरश्वः शान्तिः पुरुषः शान्तिर्ब्रह्म शान्तिः ब्राह्मणः शान्तिः शान्तिरेव शान्तिः शान्तिर्मे अस्तु शान्तिः तयाहगं शान्त्या सर्वशान्त्या मह्यं द्विपदे चतुष्पदे च शान्तिं करोमि शान्तिर्मे अस्तु शान्तिः।
Om. Kuldeepji, I request you to please put up the poster for tomorrow's program so that everybody knows. Tomorrow we have a session on Sanskrit and integral health, and we have another wonderful speaker, Dr. P. Ram Manohar Ji, who's from the Amrita Vishwa Vidyapeeth, and he will be talking to us on the role of Sanskrit in different health traditions, primarily the Ayurvedic health tradition that Dr. Jayaraman mentioned today to us. So that's happening tomorrow. Please join us, and thank you very much for having stayed for so long and continued your active participation in this session. Thank you. Bahu dhanyawadaha. Namaste.